Welcome to part 3 of Akira's Arrow. Link in description. I hope you enjoy the fanfic and you do, then please like, comment, and subscribe for more. SAO, Akira's Arrows, Aincrad Arc by DMGK 115. Chapter 3, Avenger. Sword Art Online, Akira's Arrows. Episode 3, Avenger. Pav, Akira. Just got word, it's supposed to happen tomorrow night on floor 19. If you do go bring backup. I don't know how many will be there, and be careful Akiri boy Argo. I read the message repeatedly to make sure I was reading it right. My fingers tingled as I closed out the message window and took in a deep breath as I listened at the window of the cafe. Asuna and Kirito were doing a good job with the questioning, and Yoko was giving the answers that I expected, but it simply didn't sound like her. I could remember her from the small amount of time Aki and I had spent with her guild. Yes, she was probably beaten up about canes, but she never struck me as one who'd cry like she was now. My instincts were kicking into overdrive again. She was up to something, so I guess that made two of us. I flicked at the strings on the black bow of fate and went into my inventory to check my arrow count while I listened outside to Yoko tell her story to Kirito and Asuna. 20 arrows were left, plenty for the next day. Argo had said to bring backup, but it didn't matter to me how many showed up. I was going to take as many of them with me as I could. The thing that still rubbed me the wrong way was the man who hired them supposedly being Grimlock. How could he be involved with the murders in the safe zone, but be hiring Laughing Coffin? If he really wanted to kill Canes, why hadn't he hired Laughing Coffin sleep PK him, like the guild had tried to do to me? It couldn't be a coincidence. The moment I heard Yoko mention the incident with magic ring her guild acquired however, and how Griselda had died going to sell it however, was what made my brain start working. I shot up from the ground, and typed out a message to Asuna, coming inside, keep her talking Akira. I had just finished hearing Yoko asking about Schmidt, when I walked into the tavern. I spotted Kirito and Asuna with Yoko at the corner table, when it started to click together. It was like what happened with Kya and I. It was how I got the black bow of fate. That magic ring had to be in Grimlock's inventory now. That gave me a motive. Would Grimlock really have killed Griselda for it? He hadn't seemed like it to me at the time of knowing him, but if he really was trying to contact Laughing Coffin now, what would stop him from having done it before? I also knew that Argo's information was rarely if ever wrong. It was linked to the murder in the safe zone. I just needed to figure out how. Asuna, I said, making her and Kirito turn around as I got closer to the table. She turned and smiled at me with Kirito. Akira-kun, we were waiting for you. I hope you don't mind if he joins up Yoko. This is the friend I mentioned would be coming. Asuna turned back and smiled at me again, and a pang of guilt cut through my chest. She had cried a few weeks ago, when I had almost gotten sleep PK'd. I had sworn I wouldn't hide anything from her again, that we were in this game together. But here I was, doing it again. I didn't have a good excuse for it. I just didn't want her to get caught up in my thirst for revenge that was more than likely going to get me killed. If she died for my vendetta, then I would never forgive myself. Argo had asked me multiple times why I was doing this, and each time I had the same answer for her. It was just something I had to do, a deep, viscera need. I felt a need like I needed water, to make the people who had taken away Kya and Aki feel exactly what I was feeling. Maybe I made them hurt as much I was, then it would make me feel better somehow. Or maybe I just really did want to die. Either way, if I did, at least I spent the last few days with Asuna, and Kirito as well. I had just met him of course, but I could see it in his eyes. He cared for her. The feeling was mutual with Asuna. Someone else would be here to take care of my best friend. Good to see you Akira, Kirito said, as I pulled up a chair at the edge of the table. Thanks for helping us out. Of course, I said, turning to Yoko and smiling. Despite the situation, it was good to see her. I didn't get a chance to say anything however, before I saw it. The purple-haired girl's eyes widened when she saw me, and she looked genuinely happy and distraught at the same time. I thought she was hiding something, but I didn't think it was anything nefarious. Akira, she said, stuttering as she shook her head. It's been months. We were all worried about you. I'm glad to see you're all right. I didn't expect when I saw you again, that you'd be coming at Asuna's request. It's good to see you too, I said, trying to not let my face betray what I already knew. I'm sorry, it's under the circumstances. Yolko's face fell, and she looked at her tea. I also noticed a few weeks ago that Kya wasn't on my friends list anymore. Aki wasn't either. I'm sorry. I did my best to relax. I knew she meant well, so did everyone who offered their condolences. I appreciated it, I really did. However, I was coming to learn, hearing people say, I'm sorry, did nothing except make me remember the fact Kya and Aki were gone. And despite what I wished for every morning, they weren't coming back. It's okay, I said, as I saw Asuna, and Kirito cast me similar glances. I turned back to Yolko and shook my head. We can catch up later. Why don't you tell me what you told Kirito and Asuna again? I could see her shift in mood the minute I said something. She knew she had to act like herself around me, that I would be able to tell if she was lying. Still, she nodded and went on telling me the same exact story that she had told Asuna and Kirito. I did my best to not make it look like I'd heard it all at the window. As I listened, I couldn't help but remember meeting Yolko and her guild those months ago with Kya and Aki. Apparently, Kya and Yolko had known each other even in the real world. That had almost been enough for me to agree to be in the guild. I had ended up being the de facto leader of our little trio, at least according to Kya, but I like to think we made decisions together. More often than not, however, she deferred to my judgment. I wish she hadn't at times. She had been so much better suited for this world than I had. Listening to me so much had gotten her killed. That was what still hurt me the most. The fact that the moment I decided that we'd finally try and do some good, join the front lines and fight for the other players, is when she died. That's what hurt me most. I couldn't fathom how many times I thought about telling Asuna we should stop. If I lost her, Argo, any of the few friends I had left, I really wouldn't be able to carry on. Maybe that was another reason I was okay with the idea I may die the next day. We were just going to work to summon Schmidt, Asuna told me, her normal comforting smile making me feel a little less anxious. I know someone in the Holy Dragon Alliance. We can gather together again tomorrow, that way you can see him, Yolko. She's right, Kirito said with a nod. Asuna, do you mind taking Yolko back to her room while you go? Yolko, it's important that you stay in your room for tonight, don't go out. Right, she said, looking over at me again. It was good to see you again, Akira. You too, we'll figure this out, I assured her, before trying my best to smile, but it probably was a horrible fake one. I noticed Kirito tilt his head to look at me from the corner of his eye, but before he had a chance to ask me anything, Asuna stood and looked at the both of us. She smiled like she normally did. What will the two of you do? Before I could say anything, Kirito spoke up. We'll meet up after to talk more. I just wanted to talk with Akira real quick. I did my best not to jump from my seat. He turned and looked at me, showing no signs that it was anything serious. Still, I was worried. Was he simply much more perceptive than I first thought? Asuna didn't question it. With a quick bow from Yolko, she left her tea and soon was following Asuna out of the restaurant. Trying not to turn around right away with an accusatory look on my face, I managed to wait until I saw Asuna leave with Yolko following before meeting the swordsman's eyes. So, what is it you wanted to talk about? I asked him, as we both could see Yolko and Asuna walking outside the restaurant. Kirito stood up, and I did the same. I tried not to meet his eyes. They were kind eyes, nothing accusatory in them. He seemed sorry for something. A part of me wanted to spill out everything that I knew then that I was going to do the next day. Maybe if I told him, he'd understand. I could see it in his eyes. He had lost much in this death game as well. He had told me he had a sister himself. Would he have been trying to do the same as me? But I couldn't, especially with him having a sister back home. I wouldn't want him risking his life any more than he had to. It's nothing important really, he said, sounding nervous as he rubbed the back of his head. Finally he sighed and met my eyes. I just wanted to ask, well, are you okay? Okay, I said, a panic rising in my throat. Yeah, or all right, he asked, still sounding nervous to ask. I know we just met yesterday and all, but well, it's just something about you. You seem off. How would you know? I said, trying not to come off as rude. It's like you said, we barely know each other. I know, he said, holding up his hands, but I saw his eyes narrow now. It's just, I can tell. It looked like I really had underestimated him. I didn't answer, and apparently that gave him all the information he needed. I was about to spill everything, before he put a hand on my shoulder and shook his head. Asuna speaks really highly of you, he said with a sigh. Whatever it is, I hope you'll let her help, me too even. I wished that I could. I fought back the sick feeling in the pit of my stomach and met the boy's eyes. Can I ask you something personal? I said, the tips of my fingers tingling. He shrugged. Sure, what is it? What's your sister's name? I said, the image of my own coming back to me as it often did. The question caught him off guard. I thought he wouldn't answer for a minute, but eventually he met my eyes and spoke. Sagwa. But we all call her Sugu. She's my cousin, but we were raised as siblings. I ignored her really after I learned that. There's a lot of things I wish I could say to her. I nodded, going to walk past him, and putting my own hand on his shoulder. Can I ask you more thing? I don't see why not, he said, not trying to move my hand. I squeezed his shoulder and shakily sighed. Promise me that you'll beat this game, and get back to Sagwa, and say those things you have to say to her. God knows that there's a few things I'd say to mine if I could. Kirito didn't strike me as the kind of guy who was one for long talks about his feelings. He was more like me, I could tell. He kept them bottled up, and battled with them internally as opposed to stating them out loud. I appreciated that, especially then. He didn't try to ask me anything, didn't try to talk about what I said. He only nodded, a smile on his face. I promise. So, what do you say we get some lunch for us and Asuna before she gets back? We'll have a lot to go over. I didn't think his answer would make me feel as good as it did. At least one pair of siblings would be reunited after this game. Besides, I'd fought Kirito. If anyone was going to clear the game, it'd be him and Asuna. Also, anything could happen. Maybe I'd miraculously survive the game myself as opposed to what I thought. Maybe I'd survive to meet Kirito's sister Sagwa. Yeah, I said with a nod. I know a good place, Asuna, and I normally go. Let's head out. He nodded and started walking away. I went to follow, trying to think on what I would do the next day. Wondering on the last mystery I'd probably have to solve, when I heard something behind me, like a crashing sound. It was faint, but with my listening skill I picked it up. I turned, to see where Yolko's tea had been sitting. It had burst and destroyed, its durability reaching 0. And just like that, I knew what was going on, and it only made me feel guiltier. Pav. Kirito. I listened to what Yolko was telling Schmidt, but out of the corner of my eye, I was watching Akira. He leaned against the wall across from Asuna as I stood next to an anxious Schmidt. The black bow of fate was in his hands, he held it up on the ground, and he was fiddling with the string, and while it wasn't there physically, I could practically see the weight draped over his shoulders. Asuna hadn't noticed anything yet, perhaps it was because she was his friend, and she'd been used to seeing Akira brood like this, but all my instincts screamed something was wrong. I could feel it since he had asked me that question about my sister the previous day. I had meant it when I asked to help. I may have played solo, but it didn't mean I would leave someone I'd started seeing as a friend to deal with something clearly such a big deal alone. So, that's what happened to Keynes, Schmidt said, his foot tapping. And the spear, it's really Grimlock's. Yolko nodded. It's true. There's no doubt. Outside, the sun was setting, it would be nighttime soon, and if another murder was going to happen, it would be soon. I kept looking between Yolko and Schmidt, to Akira. Thankfully Asuna hadn't noticed me doing so. He seemed uninterested in what was being said and looked more focused on staring at Yolko. I tried to see what he was seeing, what he could possibly be looking at, but the longer I tried, the longer it confused me. He was one of Asuna's best friends, what could he possibly be hiding? Schmidt shot from his chair. But that doesn't make any sense. Why would he wait 6 months to kill him? Unless... Wait, do you think he really did steal the ring? Did he kill Griselda? Now he's after you and me because we didn't want to sell it. I wasn't focusing much on the conversation now. Thankfully Akira didn't see me peeking at him from the corner of my eye. At Schmidt's words, Akira looked surprised, before he settled back into a glare towards Yolko, which she didn't notice. Was he trying to accuse her of something? Or Grimlock could have made the spear for someone else in our guild, and they killed Canes. Yolko said, her eyes widened as she stood. Or maybe this is Griselda, come back from the dead. The thought chilled me to the core. Of course, there were ghost monsters in the game, they were tough to deal with, but I'd never heard of a player coming back from the dead to be one. I met Asuna's eyes from across the room, and she had the same look on her face that I did. Akira, however, didn't seem fazed. I noticed him scooting along the wall, his eyes not coming off Yolko. I watched as Akira's eyes widened, and I looked to Yolko to see what he could be looking at but saw nothing. Was his perception skill that high? What? Schmidt said incredulously, his nervous look only amplifying. I tilted my head, as Yolko, who looked terrified, started to stand up from her chair. A player can't deal damage to another player in a safe zone, she said, panic setting into her voice. But something else like a ghost can. What if it was Griselda come back from the dead? Yolko, calm down, Akira said, speaking his fist words, his eyes narrowed at the purple-haired girl. I looked over at Asuna and we both had the same bewildered look. What she was saying was true enough. Monsters and other game enemies can damage players in a safe zone, but a ghost of a former player. I didn't put anything past this world at this point, but that sounded ridiculous. I can't, Akira. Yolko snapped at him, her voice rising. I couldn't sleep last night, so I laid up and did nothing but think about it. It's all our faults, the whole guild's, her blood is on all our hands. It was that ring, her fate was sealed as soon as it dropped, we should have done exactly what she told us to do. Yolko. Relax, Akira said, stepping forward to try and grab hold of her arm. A panicked look appeared on her face, and she smacked his hand away. She stumbled back towards the window, her eyes almost glossed over as she shook her head. Grimlock. He was the only one who said we should leave the decision to Griselda. She said, leaning back against the window now. He's the only one who can avenge Griselda. He's the only one who has the right. Akira looked down at the hand Yolko had smacked away, and an annoyed look came to his face. He looked back to Asuna and I, who I was sure were all thinking the same thing. Could this really be a possibility? We all looked to Schmidt, who fell back into his seat. He clearly did believe it. No way, why? Why do it now? Why kill us now? He yelled, shooting up to his feet. You can't be okay with his Yolko. How can you be okay with being killed over some stupid vendetta? I had to grab the man's arm before he could take another step. If there was one thing I'd learned, it was that a lot of people were unstable in moments like this. Stop, that's enough, Akira said, stepping in front of Schmidt, and turning back to Yolko at the window. Yolko, enough from you too. Look, I know. He didn't have time to finish before a loud squelch hit my ears. Yolko lurched forward, and my stomach leapt up into my throat. The girl's eyes went wide and she stumbled. Stumbled just enough for me to see a knife sticking out of her back. I yelled and went to run forward, and just noticed Akira still in the middle of the room. He looked angry, angrier than I'd seen anyone in a long time. Pav. Akira. Yolko. Kirito yelled, rushing right past me as Yolko fell back from the window. That idiot. If she had just told me what was going on, I could have helped them, and I could have saved both her and Canes from what was coming later that night. Asuna yelled out from behind me, and Kirito looked out the window. I rushed over to join him, and out past the rooftop I spotted the man in a black cloak. Cursing, I realized it was probably Canes. The two of them had a very well executed plan, I'd give them that, and I had no doubt they probably would have told Asuna, Kirito and I what was happening afterwards. Still, I cursed myself too. I had been waiting for the whole conversation to be over to get Yolko alone, so I could tell her how I knew her plan. If I had called her out in front of Asuna and Kirito, the two of them would have either tried to stop me, or worse said they were going to insist on going with me. Both of which I wanted to avoid. Damn it. Kirito yelled, looking back at Asuna. Asuna, keep him here. He looked to me now. Akira, come on. Right, I said, ignoring Asuna's protests as I leapt out the window after Kirito. Go right, I'll follow left. He yelled, his black cloak billowing out behind him. On it, I yelled over the wind, slinging the black bow of fate off my shoulder as I leapt over to the next rooftop. I needed to catch Canes. I had to get him alone and tell him what I knew. I looked over and saw Kirito leaping from rooftop to rooftop. He pulled out throwing darts and launched them toward Canes, who I could almost to the edge of the town. Cursing, I pulled one of my arrows from the quiver on my waist and loaded the bow. Meteor shot, I yelled, as the bow blew red, and soon I fired. It landed just near Cane's feet, but I cursed. Then the immortal object tag appeared on the building. Still, it was enough to make Cane stumble, and that's when I saw Kirito closing in from the left. I hated the fact that I'd have to expose their plan, but it was necessary now. I didn't want him or Yolko to head to the forest with Laughing Coffin there. Kirito yelled as he unleashed a sword skill, but Canes leapt back and leapt to another building. Thankfully, I was right there, and went to swing with my right hand, but he ducked under it and shoved me to the ground before leaping away again. Cursing, I grabbed the black bow of fate from the ground and slung out an arrow. Ice arrow, I yelled, hoping at least the arrow's effect would hit him and keep him in place. I couldn't be lucky, however, as I heard the bell in the city ring, just as Cane's hand went to his inventory screen. Kirito, I yelled as we rushed forward side by side. A teleport crystal. I see it, he said, pulling out more of his throwing darts. I loaded another arrow. I fired and he threw at the same time, but just before they hit, the bell stopped tolling, and Canes disappeared in a puff of blue light. I nearly fell to my knees, they were shaking so bad. A stabbing pain shot through my chest. I had to lean on my bow as Kirito landed a few steps next to me, cursing himself. Damn, he got away, the boy cursed, sighing as he looked at me. Did you get a good look at his face? I shook my head, unable to meet his eyes. No, the hood made it impossible. He was quiet for a moment. I didn't know if he believed me. Kirito knew something was going on. It was just my hope he didn't call me out on it. Well, we know one thing, Kirito said, turning and looking back towards the tower from where we came. We know it's not a ghost, that was definitely a player. Come on, we should get back and tell Asuna. Yeah, you're right, I said, turning with him, and trying not to look at him. Asuna, I thought, trying not to think of what could happen later tonight. I'm sorry, Lightning Flash, but this is something I need to do. Do you really think that could have been Griselda's ghost? Asuna asked me, the two of us walking towards the town's main square. I know you and Kirito-kun said it had to be a player, but maybe it's a new form of enemy we haven't encountered yet. I don't know, I said, as we got to the park, next to a bench right next to the main fountain. I couldn't even look at her. We'll figure it out somehow, I'm sure. Akira-kun, she said, tugging on my arm. Is everything okay? You've been acting a bit strange since this morning. Kirito had gone to floor 50, to give the dagger that had killed Yolko to Agile as well, leaving Asuna and I a few minutes alone. I had to leave. According to Argo's information, Laughing Coffin would appear in another hour or so in that forest. It was the Forest of Graves, for the reason it was where many players went to place gravestones of comrades who died. I hadn't done it for Aki or Kya, but Asuna had taken the time to do it for me. I needed to be there, but that didn't make talking to Asuna then any less hard. Akira-kun, she said again when I didn't say anything. Reluctantly I turned and saw that of course she was smiling at me. You know you can tell me, whatever it is. We're in this together, the two of us. I trust you, more than I trust even the guild. That one hurt. She smiled, her big orange eyes not leaving mine with that kind look to them. I sighed. Kirito was one lucky guy, that was for sure. He was a bit awkward, and Asuna wasn't going to admit to anything anytime soon, but if they eventually did, they'd be wonderful for one another. So long as she was happy, I could go off to do what I had to do with a clear head. I'm okay, I said, faking a smile and patting her hand on my arm. You don't have to worry about me. But I do have to go. I hope you'll say goodbye to Kirito for me. Go, she said, a pang of hurt in her voice which nearly broke me. But we haven't had dinner together in days. I just got an ingredient combination to taste like mayonnaise. Where are you going? My hands curled into fists, as she looked at me with a hurt expression. If I would miss anything in this world, it would be Asuna's cooking. But most of all it would be her. I'm going down to floor 19, I told her, feeling the backs of my eyes sting as she looked at me. Sighing, I held my hands together in front of me to stop them from shaking. I'm going to my old player home. I wanted to see it again, where we all were last. Her expression darkened. I remembered her ordering and creating the gravestones for Kya and Aki. She didn't have to do it, I wasn't going to, but she had. A few weeks prior, when I had almost been sleep PK'd, Asuna had chased after the laughing coffin agent for miles outside the city with me, even more determined to capture the man than I had been. She had listened, been there when I was at my lowest, my highest, everything I'd been able to do, the fact I'd been able to live at all the last 3 months, had been thanks to the lightning flash. I never would have guessed that when she first showed up all those months ago. All I had seen was another player who could harm the ones I cared about, but she had showed me that despite what this world was doing to some, there were still those who you could rely on. Oh, I see, she said, smiling at me again and nodding. Do you want me to come with you? I don't mind, really, if you need the support I'll come. Please, stop being such a good person, I thought with a smile. I shook my head and faked another smile. No, it's okay, I'll be fine, no need to worry. Okay, she said with a sigh, smiling. Thanks for all your help, Akira-kun. I know this time of the month is hard for you, so I appreciate it, I'll see. Oh, wait, 1 minute before you leave. I was about to go for a teleport crystal in my inventory, but I stopped like she said. I watched as she scrolled through her inventory and was baffled as to what she could be grabbing. Finally, I laughed when she pulled out a wrapped sandwich. I was gonna have us and Kirito-kun have these for lunch, before we tried to figure out more of what was going on, she said with a big smile as she handed it to me. It's your favorite, I was going to make it for us when you came over anyway. All I could do was stare at the sandwich wrapped up in my hands, and I finally couldn't hold it anymore. Was I really going to do this to Asuna? It was a crazy question. If she followed me, which I knew she would, she could die. They didn't hesitate like we all did just because they were fighting players. I couldn't even explain why I was going down to the 19th floor now really. Part of it was my petty vengeance, part of it was wanting to finally be free of this death game, part of it was not caring what happened to myself anymore. And wanting to make those who made me suffer themselves. A larger part of it was that perhaps if I could kill them, then I would find some kind of closure. I knew it was a toss-up, they were strong, and there would be more than one. One I could take, maybe two even, but any more than that. I didn't know. But I was willing to die to make that feeling of pain I had every morning waking up go away. Maybe tomorrow I'll make. Asuna started again but stopped when she looked at my tears falling onto the sandwich wrapper. Akira-kun. What is it, or you? Huh, what? She stopped talking after I hugged her. My arms wrapped around her, and I could tell she got all embarrassed for a moment. Still, after a few seconds, she must have heard the sob I let out, because she wrapped me back up in a hug moments later. Hey, Akira-kun, she said, her hand on the back of my head. What's, thank you, I said, my arms trembling like sleeves as I held onto her. She let out a nervous laugh as she held onto me. Ha, it's no problem, it's just a sandwich. I make them for you all the time. I saw what time it was in the lower left corner of my vision and cursed in my head. Shakily sighing, I put on a fake smile, and let go of Asuna, taking a step back and wiping the tears from my cheeks, and meeting her concerned eyes. No, not just for the sandwich, I said, chuckling with the tears still in my eyes. For giving me a reason to have fought the last 3 months. If I die now I'm happy that I at least got to meet someone like you. Asuna smiled and shook her head. I'll have none of this dying talk, Akira-kun. I've told you 100 times, we'll get out of this together. We can relax when we've had dinner together in the real world. We had talked about it 100 times. The first few weeks we'd known each other, obviously we hadn't spoken much of the real world, however. After so many fights and battles together over the previous 3 months, we talked about it all. I knew all about the pressure she felt from her mother. How she'd missed her high school entrance exams after getting stuck in SAO, how she actually fought with Kirito on the first floor boss raid. She told me about her hobbies, her school, her family, and in return I'd done the same. I could say unequivocally, Asuna Yuki was my best friend, and here I was lying to her. Yeah, I said, turning and pulling out the teleport crystal from my inventory. After looking at the time once more, I smiled at her again, tears still in my eyes. Tell Kirito, I said, he better take care of you. He's got his work cut out for him. She got all red like I assumed. Huh, what are you implying? I could hear how embarrassed she was, her face was as red as her hair, and despite the tears I still had I laughed. Nothing at all, I said, my hand squeezing around the crystal. I smiled at her, and with my heart ready to burst out of my chest I shook my head. Just take care of yourself, Asuna. What do you mean? She said, her voice sharper as she took a step closer towards me. You make it sound like you're going away. Akira, what's going on? You never. I'll be okay, Asuna, I said, wiping the tears off my cheeks again. I'll finally be okay. Teleport, floor 19. Akira. I just had time to hear her yell my name again, reaching out her hand, before I teleported away. Pav. Kirito. I still don't know what else it could be, I pondered out loud, sighing as I leaned forward, elbows against my knees next to Asuna on the bench. It was definitely a player we chased. Do you have any ideas? Maybe it really was Griselda's ghost. Asuna said, her voice small. I don't know anymore. I'm out of ideas. Huh, I said, looking and seeing her sunken face. She had her hands in her lap, and all she did was look at them, frowning, her eyes fallen. Asuna, is everything okay? She sighed, the light from the moon and the lampposts around us hitting off her skin. She was really pretty, that was something nobody could deny, certainly not me. I had gotten used to over the previous few days, her confident smile and attitude. It didn't make sense to me that somebody as strong as her could sound like she was now. People bustled around us, but I didn't mind. I had a few friends during my time in Aincrad so far. I wanted to hope Asuna was one of them, somewhat, despite our differences. Shaking her head, she met my eyes. I'm okay. Here, we may as well have these, are you hungry? She pulled up her inventory, and after clicking a few buttons, 2 wrapped sandwiches appeared in her hands. Smiling again, she handed one over to me. Huh, wow. Thanks, I said, and I could almost feel my mouth watering, it looked absolutely amazing. When did you have the time today to go and buy these? She scoffed when I looked wide eyes down at the sandwich. I didn't buy them. I made them this morning. I didn't know if the 3 of us would have had time to stop for lunch. Better eat it quick, before the durability runs out. Akira. That's what had her so upset. Despite what they had both told me, hearing that made me feel weird. Why did it bother me so much? I didn't say anything about Akira, or what I thought that I knew. I just bit into the sandwich. And it was good, really good. Wow. This is good. I said, genuinely excited as I chewed. I downed more of it, laughing as I did, not remembering the last time I had something this good. You could make a fortune selling these. Ha. You really think so? Asuna said, biting into hers. I nodded as I turned to look at her. Yeah, I do. You got something to fall back on if things in the guild don't work out. She started laughing, and I managed to do the same. It wasn't something I often did. What other reason was there to smile when you were trapped in a death game? After we both laughed, Asuna finally wiped the tears that had come and shook her head. Maybe I do. Thank you for working with me these last 2 days, she said, a small smile finally coming to her face. She met my eyes and sighed. It looks like we'll need another day to figure this out. I just wish that Akira. She drifted off, not finishing her sentence, and I felt a weird feeling in my stomach again. Are you sure that that you too? I said before I could stop it, probably sounding like a complete fool. Well, are you certain you both aren't her? Or well, you won't. You know. She rolled her eyes and groaned, punching my arm. I already told you no. What's the matter? Can a boy and a girl just not be good friends without something else going on to you? I scrambled as she hit me, and while I was stuttering to try and get out an apology, I dropped the sandwich. No, I wasn't done, I said, trying to catch it before it hit the ground. It did, and it disappeared into blue pixels as its durability went to 0. Asuna ticked her tongue. Well, should have eaten it faster like I said. I watched the sandwich disappear, and finally it all hit me. It all made complete sense, and I kicked myself for not figuring it out sooner. Everything made sense. The murders, Akira's behavior. I bent over and held a finger up to Asuna. Shish, I said, which I'm sure earned me one of her glares. That's it. I figured it out. Huh, figured what out? Asuna asked, looking at me confused as I sat back up. The murders. Kane's, Yolko, I said, pulling myself back up to my seat, trying not to sound excited. They're alive. The both of them are. Alive, Asuna said, clearly baffled. What do you mean? We watched them disappear. No, they didn't disappear, I said, looking at the spot the sandwich had ran out of durability. It was their items that did. Their items? She asked me. I nodded. Exactly that. You see, it is impossible to kill someone in a safe zone, but that doesn't mean items don't take damage and lose durability. Finally, Asuna's eyes widened. Like that sandwich you just dropped. So when we first saw Kane's, the spear was sticking out of his armor. So we didn't see him die, we saw his armor run out of durability and disappear. Yeah, I finished for her, scoffing and shaking my head. It has an effect similar to a person dying. And Yolko, we never saw her back. She probably was watching her item's durability the whole time. When it finally was about to go, she said, her eyes widening as she shot to her feet. That was why Akira was trying to get around her. Why he tried to grab her. I nodded, careful on the subject. Exactly. Akira said he was friends with Yolko and her guild. He probably knew about the plan for them to fake their deaths. No, Asuna said sternly, meeting my eyes. He would never come up with a plan like this with them and not tell me. I chuckled a bit and shook my head. Asuna, I know he's your friend, but it's logical. It's not even bad really, maybe he just. No, it isn't true, she said, shaking her head. Why would he have tried to stop her in the tower if he was in on it? Why would he chase down the one player with you? Wait, that one player? Probably Kane's, I said, ignoring her comments about Akira for the moment, realizing they made too much sense. He did it to help her fake her death. He and Yolko probably had Schmidt under suspicion for Griselda's murder. We played right into Yolko's hands. And Akira's. Asuna narrowed her eyes, and I felt guilty right away. I'm telling you, he didn't know anything. At least not at first about their plan, but if he figured it out before us, why wouldn't he tell me? I chewed at the inside of my lip. He probably had his reasons for helping them. Or maybe whatever it is, it's dangerous. Hey, do you still have Yolko on your friends list? Shaking, Asuna nodded, and pulled up her friends list, clicking Yolko's name. It says she's on a forest on floor 19. But why? Wait, Akira. Huh, what about him? I asked. She shook her head, scrolling to Akira's name. He told me he was going to floor 19 too. Oh, thank God, he's not in the same spot as Yolko. She's in a forest there. And where's Akira? Shakily sighing, she looked at her friend's dot on the map. He went to visit the old home. His sister and girlfriend all lived. Do you think he's just on the same floor by coincidence? I shrugged, my own worry rising. I don't know. I thought he seemed off yesterday. You know him better than I do. He was acting weird, right? He was. But if he's at his old house, he was telling me the truth, she said, closing out her map and sighing again. What do we do now? I shook my head. Nothing. We just let Yolko and Kane's do what they have to do. As for Akira, well, I don't think he wants any visitors right now. He would have asked us if he did. How do you know? she asked. I just do, I said, sitting back onto the bench. Do you wanna go and get some tea? I knew he wanted to be alone, because I'd been the same way. I had commissioned grave markers for Saki, and the rest of her friends. Akira was mourning, but so long as he was safe, it was enough for me, and I hoped Asuna as well. Pav, Akira. Amazing as ever Asuna, I mumbled, sitting at my old dining table, nibbling at the last bit of the sandwich Asuna had given me, savoring every bite. I may as well make my last one count. The old house Aki, Kya and I had bought was modest, not very big, but set right outside a lake, only about a mile or so outside the forest where her and Aki's grave markers were now. Only a mile or so away from the same forest I may die in about 15 minutes. Laughing Coffin was many things, and Punctual was one of them. They'd show up to try and attack Yolko, Keynes and Schmidt soon, I was sure. I had sent one last message to Argo, telling her thanks for everything, and that it would all end tonight. One way or another I wanted it to. The living room decorations were all still in pristine condition. It was Kya who had picked out the furnishings. I had initially been upset she spent so much of our money on paintings, chairs and cookware. However, she had said, if we're going to be trapped here, we may as well be comfortable. Aki had also loved the decorations. Especially the multiple potted flowers Kyashi had grown herself in the garden outback. The living room had one large hearth with a picture above the mantel taken with SAO's in-game photo feature. It was mostly dark in the house now. I'd only lit one lamp when I came in, but the moonlight from the full moon outside had given me enough to see. I ate the last of the sandwich from Asuna, before picking the black bow of fate up from against the table and went to look at the photo again. I shakily sighed as the minutes ticked closer and ran my hand over the frame. What's the point of going home after this, Kya? If you and Aki aren't there. I had a reason to fight to clear the game, of course. That reason was so that Asuna, Argo, Yolko, Agile, the few friends I had could go home. So that Kirito could go home and tell his sister Sagwa what he needed to tell her. Yeah, I had a few reasons to continue the previous few months, but each day only got worse and worse. Each day my tank slowly leaked more and more. It was ready to burst now, and tonight was the only way I could think to make it end. The picture was of the three of us just as we'd bought the place. We had still been pretty low leveled, so we had our beginning gear, but Kya still had the black bow of fate at that point. The legendary weapon I had now could be attained early, and Kya had been sure to take good care of it until she died. It was why it was so powerful for me now. And Aki. She smiled in the picture like she didn't have a care in the world. It was like the three of us were on vacation back in the real world. It had been Aki's dream as well as mine, to go and see the world. I wanted to be a historian, visit ancient places and study them. Aki had wanted to draw them. She loved manga and anime. She had dreams of drawing and writing her own series. She had wanted to travel with me to get ideas. That was her dream. She knew it even at only 11. But now, your story's going to be left undrawn, I said, looking at her smiling with her two blonde ponytails. I'm sorry, Aki. Her hair had always been brighter blonde than mine. Mine was a mix of brown and blonde really, more like our mother, but we both had the same blue eyes. Each morning I woke up in my new home, waiting for her to come bug me or Kya for breakfast. I used to scold her for being impatient, for being rude. I had scolded her for a lot, even right before she died. I had never appreciated her enough, her or Kya. In the 2 years we spent on the streets of Tokyo, while I had always been worried about making money, finding ways for us to survive, I never fully appreciated what Aki had done. She had made me smile, given me a reason to go on. Look after your little sister. Aki needs you, Akira. I could hear my mom saying it from the hospital bed in my mind then. She needs you, just like you need her. Now the both of you, be sure to take care of each other. We're a family, that's what they do. We don't know how much longer I'll be in here, so you need to ready. She had died, the cancer had taken her a week later. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, I said, feeling myself break, tears starting to come down. I shook my head and looked at Aki's face again. I failed. Just like I always have. I miss you. All three of you. I can't take it. I got a splitting headache when I heard the alarm going off as the clock in my vision started keeping. It was time. I had to leave now, or else Yolko and her guild would be in danger. I'd miss Laughing Coffin. Quickly, I sucked in a breath, and grabbed the black bow of fate from against the hearth. My hand ran over the picture one more time, before I went to leave. I need to move quick. I whispered to myself, going to my inventory and equipping a new fresh quiver of 20 arrows, and switching back to my armor. It'll depend on how many. The message notification appeared in my window, making me stop in the door. From Asuna. Akira, stop. I know what you're doing. You can't go alone. Stay where you are. Kirito and I are on our way. Damn it. I cursed, closing out the window, before I heard a piercing cry come from the forest. I spun around and saw the dead white forest of graves. It was a woman's voice, and I realized it had to be Yolko. The cold air felt like it would freeze the tears on my wet cheeks, but I cursed and slung the black bow of fate around my back and took off for the woods. I needed to do this before Asuna and Kirito came. I wouldn't let them get caught up in this. Pav. Kirito. Hey, Kirito. Asuna asked, as the NPC waitress set tea out in front of us. What would you have done in their situation? Huh, what do you mean? I asked, just happy she seemed to be in a bit of a better mood than before we'd come. If you had to decide on what to do with a special item like that ring, she asked, looking down into her tea leaves, a small smile on her face. What would you have done? I managed to smile myself before pondering. What would I have done if, say, the moonlit black cats had found an item like that? At the time I would have let them keep it, seeing as I was so much of a higher level than they were. Would I have let the weakest player have it? I looked at Asuna as I thought, but I still couldn't get a nagging feeling out of the back of my head. Why did I feel like we were missing something? Something huge. And why did I know it had to do with Akira? Good question. I started, meeting her eyes from across the table. Part of the reason I play solo is to avoid situations like that. She nodded, the smile still on her face. In the guild, we have the drop go to whoever killed the monster. That way, we can avoid any fights. You know, that's why I've always found the idea of marriage and SAO really great. My eyes widened, and I could practically feel my pulse quicken. She looked genuinely happy for a moment as she looked at me. Why would she mention marriage to me of all people? Was she trying to say something? Was all I could say at first. What do you mean? She shrugged, looking back at her tea again. It's just the idea of having a partner, someone you love in a game like this. It's nice. You have a shared item storage, everything's out in the open. I think it's both practical and romantic. I let out a breath I'd been holding and met her eyes again. I see. So how many times have you been married, Al? No, that came out wrong. My knee throbbed as I looked at the little fork pointed at me. I thought you said it was pragmatic. I said, she hissed angrily, that it's romantic and practical. I've never been married, for your information. If you want to know about it, you should ask Akira when you see him again. He was married in the game to his real-life girlfriend. Yeah, I remember him telling me, I said, feeling guilty about ever feeling upset all over again. I met her eyes, which had fallen at the mention of Akira's girlfriend. You seem as if you knew her too, did you? I didn't want to talk about Akira again. It clearly made her upset that he had left for floor 19 without her. Still, I was too curious for my own good, and I just felt like I was one small piece of a puzzle away from figuring out what the guy's deal was. I didn't know her for long, she sighed, a small smile on her face as she looked at me. Believe it or not, I've only known Akira for about 3 months now. He's really become maybe my best friend. You care about him a lot, don't you? I asked her, reminding myself again that she denied they were together about 3 times now. She nodded and sighed again. Yeah, and I'm worried about him now. Like I said, it's been 3 months since his little sister, Aki, and Kya died. I'm worried he's going to do something to get himself hurt. I chewed at my lip again and sucked in a breath. Asuna. How did you meet him? I hope she didn't think I was prying. I simply felt I needed to know. Needed to know, so that I could finally put the case from the last 2 days to bed. And I wanted to make sure he was okay too. Even just from the 2 days, and our duel, there was just something about him. Well, I guess I've already told you a lot already, she said with a sigh, meeting my eyes again. Do you remember 3 months ago, when that article was posted in information pamphlets about a special event on floor 50? For a new legendary bow called Thunderstrike. I nodded. Yeah, I thought it was kinda odd, but almost went to check it out myself out of pure curiosity. I decided against it though. Yeah, well, you see, for most of the game Akira lived with his sister Aki, and his wife Kya on floor 19, she explained. They were an actual real-life family in the game. So, Akira at first didn't join the assault team. Up until 3 months ago, he wanted to wait it out with his family. Can't say I blame him, there are tons like that, I said, thinking on what I would have done in Akira's situation. Would I really have been so willing to go fight on the front lines, if Sugu had been trapped in the game with me? So, you're telling me, you didn't meet him in the guild? No. You see, eventually he tells me, Kya and Aki wanted to come join us, she said, shaking her head and taking a sip of her tea. He tells me they pestered him for weeks to come join the assault team. Eventually, he relented. They went to join, and this was at the time of the event. With Kya being an archer, they went to floor 50 first, to get the bow from the event. But, how did you meet them? I asked, trying to put the pieces together. Well, the guild was curious about the event, so they sent me in a squad to investigate. I sent knights ahead to the dungeon, but they didn't come back, she said, a smile coming back to her. So, I went looking for them and that's when I met 3 of them. I helped them clear out the dungeon entrance, and the 4 of us agreed to party together to clear it out. We needed to split up to clear all ways to the end of the dungeon, and Akira wasn't going to let me, a stranger, go with his wife or sister, so me and him went to clear one way together. That was when we first fought together. A cold feeling ran down my chest again. But something went wrong with the event. I remember reading about it in an information pamphlet. Then you know already. It was a trap by Laughing Coffin, she said, her voice growing small, almost shaky. I did everything I could but I wasn't strong enough. Akira and we fought them but there were 4 of them, and had to protect Aki. She was only 13. They killed Kya and Aki both. Akira after they died, he equipped Kaya's bow, and tried to fight them for me to escape but he overdid it. He passed out and I had to teleport us away. After that well, I convinced him to join the assault team. He isn't a member of my guild anymore but something like that. It brings people closer together. I listened and took it all in, my view on Akira changing with each word. You never did know what a person was going through unless you talked to them and heard their story. The look in his eyes that I saw, it all made sense now. He had experienced loss, like few others had. I'd heard of groups of friends getting trapped in the game, like Klein and his guild, but never an entire real-life family. But after all of that, I could only think of one thing Akira had said. Asuna went on, a small smile on his face. See what I said, about marriage and SAO being romantic and practical. Akira. After Kya-chan died, her items went to him, and he used them too. That's it. Asuna, that's it, I said, cutting her off, a level of panic setting in. I looked up and met her eyes, shooting to my feet. You just said it. It's like what happened with Akira's bow. What happens to one player's items after they died if they're married? Their items get transferred to their spouse, she said, shaking her head. I don't understand, Kirito-kun, what are you trying to say? Asuna. Then what happened to the ring? I said, my head ringing as I reached over and grabbed her hands to pull her up. The ring they found, if it was in Griselda's inventory when she was murdered then Grimlock has it now, she said, and after initially looking at me like I was insane, let me pull her up from her seat. She squeezed my hand as she looked at me. But you really think that Grimlock murdered his own wife for a magic item? This game, it changes people, I said, finally realizing how it all connected to Akira. We need to be sure. If Yolko and Keynes told Grimlock about their plan, then he could be planning. No. Oh no, Asuna said, grabbing my wrist harder, and I could see tears coming to her eyes. She started shaking, her teeth gritted together, and she shook her head. Akira-kun, you idiot. Huh, what are you talking about? I said, looked at Asuna as she rapidly pulled up her message window and clicked on Akira's name. Asuna, what is it? I was right. There's nothing Akira wouldn't tell me about, she said, her other hand trembling as she typed out the message to Akira. Except one thing. He's only ever kept one thing from me. He said it would put me in danger and make me worry. I realized what she meant right away and put the dots together. When he was almost asleep, PK'd. She furiously clicked send on her message to Akira and met my eyes, tears welling up in her own. She was still gripped onto my wrist. Yes, Akira had been hunting for Laughing Coffin and they figured out he was, she said, going to her inventory next and pulling out a teleport crystal as she dragged me out of the restaurant. They tried to kill him, and he promised me he'd leave it be and let the guild handle it. That's why he was acting so weird. You think he knew about Yolko's plan? I asked as she dragged me out into the city at night. She shook her head. No, not at first he didn't. But he probably figured it out and got information from Argo about a Laughing Coffin job. He told me. I squeezed her hand again. Asuna, what is it? She met my eyes in the night then with tears in her own. He said, take care of yourself, before he left. Kirito-kun, he's going to try and fight them himself. I have no right to ask you this, but will you? You don't have to ask, I said, realizing finally that she's been holding my wrist for a very long time. Nervously I removed my wrist from her grip but smiled. Let's go and save our friend. Hang on, Akira. Don't do anything stupid, at least until I get there. I thought as Asuna nodded, grabbing my wrist again. Teleport, floor 19, she yelled, before we both disappeared. Pav, Yolko. Oh yay, what game should we play now? The man said, the knife dripping poison as he dragged it near Schmidt's neck. Oh, I know, let's play the game where we make them all fight and kill each other, only letting the survivor go. The tallest one scoffed, the large chopper at his side. Only problem with that is the last time you did it, you killed the survivor anyway. I whimpered, never had in this entire disgusting game had I been this afraid. Keynes was frozen next to me too, as the giggling man shook his head with that poison knife waving around, coming closer to me now. I tried to back up, but I felt the tip of the third member bloody estoc sword poke into my back. I yelled and spun back around, bumping into Keynes who helped me up. Both of us boxed in now as Schmidt groaned on the ground. Oh come on, you weren't supposed to tell them. The man with the knife whined, before laughing again. Oh man, it's going to be as fun anymore. You'll have your fun, the large one said, raising up his chopper, a white demonic smile appearing beneath his hood as lumbered over Schmidt. Alright, let's get this show on the road. No, I yelled, but I was yanked back by the man with the estoc. I wanted to reach for my knife, but the moment I felt the blade tip my back, I froze. I was a coward in the end. I knew I should have told him. Was all I could think as I watched the man go to end Schmidt's life. I should have told Akira what was happening, Asuna and Kirito too, I should have. Meteor shot. An arrow zipped through the air and smashed the ground right in front of the man who was about to kill Schmidt. The massive man with the chopper yelled as he was knocked backwards, more arrows followed, and Keynes grabbed me to pull me to the ground as they passed by. What the hell is going on? The one with the estoc hissed as an arrow hit him in the shoulder, and he stumbled back to the other members of Laughing Coffin. We weren't supposed to encounter resistance. Oh, but this makes it fun again. The one with the knife said, waving it around and holding out his arms. Come out, mystery player. Come in and join the party. Whoever it is, the large one said, picking up his chopper again and narrowing his eyes towards me and Keynes. They won't help you both. Now, let's try. Lightning volley. Multi-shot. The voice yelled again, and a crackle of lightning rang above my head. I watched the arrows strike the ground and create an electrical field. This time Laughing Coffin was ready, the three of them leapt back, weapons out and ready. I was just about to try and go for a teleport crystal, when a blur of motion shot past me and landed on 2 feet between Kane's, me and Laughing Coffin, a black cloak billowing out behind him. Akira! I yelled, my heart nearly sinking to my feet. Was I really going to sit by and let Kaya's boyfriend risk his life for me? I wish I had caught you sooner this morning, Yolko. My old friend said, pulling another arrow from the quiver on his waist. His eyes didn't leave Laughing Coffin. I would have been able to tell you they were coming. Grimlock set you up. Sorry I didn't get here sooner. What? I didn't want to believe Grimlock would sink so low, but that wasn't what I was worried about right now. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, Asuna or Kirito, I yelled to him, as he still hadn't turned around from Laughing Coffin. Akira, you can't fight them all, you. Get Schmidt healed and get out. He hissed, still not looking back at us. I'll buy you time. You're insane. Kanes yelled from next to me. You can't fight them all on your own, you'll die. It doesn't matter, Akira said in a dark voice, before pulling the strong of his bow further back as he yelled towards Laughing Coffin. Well, Po and Zaza, thank you for showing up and joining me tonight. I wanted to grab my sword and fight by his side, for Kaya's sake, but I almost stumbled back when the large one grabbed his chopper. Oh yes, I remember you, he said, a hint of amusement. You're that little blonde brat's brother, the one with the fancy arrows. Been hoping I'd see you again. That red-haired bitch's boyfriend. The one with the estoc said. Do you really think you'll succeed where she failed? What could you be thanking us for? You'll die tonight. Akira didn't back down, he only laughed. Ha, I'm thanking you for showing up, because it saves me the trouble of hunting you down later. Multi-shot, fire volley. I yelled and fell backwards with Kane's as a massive fire erupted from Akira's bow. And all I could do was look after my guild, as he rushed forward to fight. Pav, Akira. The fire erupting gave me the perfect opportunity to move forward. It hit Zaza, and the one with the poison knife on the right, leaving only Po not having been sent back. Still, the smoke gave me a natural screen to protect myself as I lashed forward. I pulled the arrow back as I leapt through the fog towards the massive man. Meteor shot, I yelled, as I let the red arrow loose. It erupted from my bow and zipped forward. Not so easy, Po yelled, as he raised his chopper. The arrow hit the blade, but Po had to struggle to keep the arrow from hitting him. In the end it grazed his cheek, and I saw his health bar begin to drop. I took advantage and kept going. I'll kill you, I shouted, feeling all of the anger, the burning desire to see him burst away like Aki had erupting out of me at once. The end of my bow slammed into his stomach, and he lurched forward. I spun around to his back and tried to knock out his legs, but he recovered in time. His chopper hit my bow and I felt a tingle rush up my arms. It nearly made me drop the black bow of fate, but I held firm until Po turned around. You'll kill me, he said, and I could see the demonic smile he had that ended Aki's life from under his hood. So, you're going to become a PKer like us. Let's make a deal, kill me now and you can lead Laughing Coffin. I yelled again and leapt backwards, going to pull out another arrow. I got one off that his post shoulder, but before I could do anything else I felt a cut across my arm. Gah, I yelled, spinning around in time to block the estoc. You think you stand a chance against my power? Zaza hissed from behind the skull mask. I'll make your brain fry like I did to your girlfriend. My power is absolute. I grunted and pushed his sword away from me, ducking and rolling to the side as I pulled out 2 more arrows and fired. One of them grazed Zaza, but the other lodged in his shoulder and started draining his HP. Oh, this is going to be fun. I love having fun, the knife-wielding man yelled, coming wildly from my left. He was so fast and aggressive I stumbled back and rolled as he went for a stab. I grabbed another arrow and pulled it back. Lightning arrow, I yelled, and the arrow had the desired effect. It slammed into the man and sent him back, paralyzing him at least for the moment. I need to thin their numbers, even if it's only for a minute. I thought as I pulled out another arrow and turned to see Po and Zaza closing down on me. Po sneered, and I could see his evil smile. You really are one of the best, boy. I'll give that to you, but now, it's time for you die. He rushed forward first, and I spun out of the way, pulling the arrow back. Ice arrow. The arrow did its job again, Po barely had time to deflect it, but when he did it smacked into his foot, and it became encased in ice. I only had a moment to relish the opportunity, before I heard Zaza rushing for me from behind. I went and grabbed an arrow to put into my bow, and as I pulled the string back I realized something horrible. This is my last one. I need to make it count, I thought, as I could see Kaya's face in my mind. Zaza had murdered her, stabbed her in the back, and that was what infuriated me the most. Meteor shot, I yelled, letting the arrow fly, and feeling tears come down my face as it did. The bright red arrow flew forward, but just before it could hit Zaza, he activated a sword skill and knocked it out of the air. His now bright blue blade swung down on me as he laughed, and I just had time to bring my bow up to block. My arms were on fire as he pressed the sword down harder onto me, and I screamed as the top of it dug into my shoulder. "You're not so tough without your arrows, are you, boy?" he hissed, a twisted smile appearing behind his hood and skull mask. "You're nothing in this world or out of it. I control life and death, and I'll kill you as I did that pathetic redhead." I fell to one knee, and I could see my HP gauge finally begin to drop. I yelled and rolled to the side. Zaza's sword struck into the ground, and I bashed against his shoulder with the black bow of fate. He cried out and spun, and we clashed for what felt like hours. I hated to admit it, but in close quarters like this, just like my duel with Kirito, he held the advantage. I spun and parried all I could. I parried him to the left at one point, and I smashed my bow into his stomach. He lurched and I saw his HP go into the yellow. The only problem was, mine was almost to the red. I tried to sweep his legs, but the sick laughter of the man with the knife hit my ears, and I just barely had time to dodge his poison knife. I yelled and nicked the smaller weapon aside, bashing at his sword arm. But the minute I did, I felt a sharp pain across my back. "Gah!" I yelled, falling to my knees and spinning to see Zaza coming for a finishing blow as my HP dipped into the red. I blocked one more strike from the man and held his attack in place. "Hold him down," Po yelled, and I knew I needed to move fast. I ducked and rolled again, going to bring up my inventory. I just had time to equip an old quiver of arrows onto myself before I had to scramble away from Po's chopper. 4 arrows. I need to use it, I thought, reaching for all 4 arrows and turning the bow horizontally, watching all 4 of the arrows in my grip glow bright as all 3 members of Laughing Coffin closed in. "Get him now," Po yelled, but just as they stepped again, I let the string loose. "Elemental barrage," I screamed, my lungs nearly collapsing as arrows of ice, fire, lightning and wind all appeared and launched forward. I heard Yolko yell for me near the large tree, and the moment the arrows left my bow, I felt all of my stamina drain and I fell to the ground, my HP falling as I did. I grinded my teeth and looked up as they all mixed together and in a massive clash of colors smashed into the ground near Laughing Coffin. I heard screaming as they all got sent flying back, flashes of lightning, fire and ice spraying everywhere. I saw HP bars rapidly dropping, but the only problem was my own was still falling. It got lower, and lower, and lower, and the more I watched it fall from the ground, feeling the places where blood should have been sting, all I could see was them. I saw Kya and Aki from that day, disappearing into blue pixels. They had been my everything, and now, finally I was going to do the same. But after that, all I saw was Asuna. I heard her laugh, saw her smile, and could even taste her homemade sauces. I saw Argo's voice, her calling me, "Akiri, boy." I saw a drink in my hand with Agile. I saw that duel I had with Kirito. Maybe I would miss a few things in this place. It had also been the last place Aki, Kya and I had been together. And then I cried. It was all I could do, as I felt all my strength zapped. I had done everything I could. Exhausted every last bit of my strength, and possibly had taken out Laughing Coffin in the process. I was dying right there in that virtual world. Yet still I felt that same pain. "Kya, Aki, Mom," I muttered to myself, as my HP finally stopped dropping, with under 100 hit points left. I miss you. Please I can't do this anymore. Why does this have to happen? Why me? Why did he do this? "Akira," I heard Yolko screech. Followed by footsteps, and then 3 large shadows, and red HP bars. You got one hell of ability, kid. Po said, his chopper on his shoulder. Zaza raised his estoc next to him. Let me do it, Zaza hissed, coughing as he pulled a potion from his inventory. I deserve it. Heyyyy. The one with the knife said, wincing as he looked near death himself. I'm the neutral party here, I wanna do it. Boss, why don't you let me? Neither of you will do it. Po snapped, raising up his chopper and glaring down at me. This little brat is mine. You were one of the best. I'll give you the quick death you deserve. Goodbye, boy. I saw the chopper begin to swing down, and